the family changes completely when a parent is on a major deployment. One thing, there's a loss of the quality of life the way it was before. The household functions more poorly. Sometimes the deployed parent does things around the house, has a sense of humor, is the person who fixes the computer, and that job is not filled by somebody else when the parent is away. Sometimes the parent who is away is the only parent that the adolescent can count on. What that means is that adolescent has a much better relationship with the deployed parent than with the parent who is staying at home. So if the parent is in Afghanistan, for example, there would be tremendous fear that he wasn't going to come home, and it would be a loaded fear, because if he doesn't come home, then what am I going to do? Because the parent who remains is not the parent that I am closest to. So the fear would be more intense in that situation. That would be... So the only parent that you can count on is important. If you go through a crisis, we had a boy whose mother was in Afghanistan, and he had a major crisis with a girlfriend, and his father was not able to help him with that crisis. That's the sort of thing that mothers do. So there was a great sense for him that he was missing something. So there's losses. There's also emotional burdens during a deployment that you don't have the rest of the time. You worry that the parent is not going to come home or is going to come home different. The other piece of the emotional burden is taking some responsibility for the state of mind of your parent who remains. It could be a very stressed parent, a very stressed mother, and actually taking some responsibility and doing what you can to try to alleviate her stress, or you have a younger sibling who is stressed, and the adolescents that we interviewed worked very hard to try to alleviate the stress of the sibling.
Knowing what we know now, with what you've gleaned from this study, are there any conclusions you can make about what more needs to be done to help, assist, support the children of military families in these circumstances?
The biggest problem, one of the biggest problems, I think, is isolation. Many of the adolescents voiced the fear at times that they voiced the sentiment that they felt all alone, that their parents were coping with tremendous stresses. The deployed parent was deployed. The parent left behind had extra stresses to cope with, perhaps a job, extra emotional stresses. And the adolescent felt that he or she had nobody to talk to. So I think one of the things would be to recognize what is going on in families during a deployment. I think what our study found was it sort of did a close-up of the family dynamics and how the family dynamic changes during the deployment. And, the problems are extra emotional work, isolation, and other institutions in the community, particularly the school, could be aware of that and could sort of build that awareness into how they deal with the students on a daily basis. What I think is one of the largest things that we found is that there is a communication gap between the adolescents and the school. For one thing, the school doesn't necessarily know that the parent is deployed. The military is not authorized to give the school that information. The parents often don't volunteer it. So all these stresses are going on in the family. The life of the child in the family has altered considerably, and the school, which is a really important part of the child's life, and the contact with the school is going to determine that child's future in many senses, doesn't know that this is going on. And so if there was a way somehow to bridge that gap, certainly the school district that we are working with is really motivated to try and do their utmost to provide as much support as possible.